This, part 6 of the series of the two witnesses in Revelation 11, explains the fulfillment of the vision or scene of the Revelator, Mr. Yakub, that comprises verses 11 through 14. Part 5 of this series closed with an explanation of verse 10. This verse states, quote, "And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth." End quote. Karriem Allah showed how these two prophets were not the two witnesses mentioned in Revelation 11, verse 3, but were the historical Moses and Jesus, the two major prophets sent to the Caucasian people to intervene in their genetic inclination to destroy the original black people of the earth. They were sent despite the fact that the Caucasian people were made by their God, Mr. Yakub, to rule over the original people for 6,000 years, according to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This 6,000-year term ended in 1914. The earth's inhabitants, under the hypnotic deceit of the synagogue of Satan, have made an appalling spectacle of the divine messages and personas of Moses and Jesus, as well as other divine prophets sent to the Caucasian people over the last 4,000 years. In Surah 6 it states, in part, quote, "Say, who revealed the book which Moses brought, a light and a guidance to men. Yet you make it, book, into scattered papers." End quote. This verse refers to how the divine teachings of the prophets, especially that of Moses, Jesus, and Prophet Muhammad, were deliberately morphed into religions and religious sects, which feature meaningless ceremonies, rituals, and sordid, vain pageantries. This is what is meant by the phrase in Revelation 11 verse 10, "They, wicked people, shall rejoice over them, prophets, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another." In the light of this reality, how can the earth's inhabitants not be the target of Almighty Allah's destructive wrath? Let us now consider the fulfillment of the scene described in verses 11 through 14 in Revelation 11. It states in verse 11, quote, "And after 3 days and a half the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them." End quote. The fulfillment of verse 11 involves the 60th year milestone of the 70-year grace period, which occurred in 2015 but was initiated in 2014. This is the meaning of the phrase 3 days and a half. How so? In fulfillment, 3½ days equal 84 hours. However, 84 refers to years and not hours. As such, 84 years is added to 1930, which was the year that Almighty Allah, Master Fard Muhammad, appeared among his people, the enslaved black people of the Western Hemisphere. This brings us to 2014, which was one of the most consequential years in the fulfillment of the Messianic prophecies in the Bible and Quran canons. How so? It was on February 21st, 2014, that the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, under the direction of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, met with Karriem Allah, then known as Kevin A. Muhammad, along with others, during the Saviours Day 2014 convention in Detroit, Michigan. This monumental meeting served as a watershed event that launched Karriem Allah's messianic journey and ministry for the final 10 years of the grace period, which also prepared him for his future function that began upon the Honorable Louis Farrakhan's cutoff as the Messiah of Grace in 2024. How does this bear on the integrity of the divine prophets of Almighty Allah? In Surah 7 of the Quran canon, it states, quote, "They, disbelievers, said, 'Have you, Prophet, come to us with the command that we should worship God alone and forsake what our forefathers used to worship? Then bring about what you have threatened us with, if you are truthful." End quote. In Surah 23, the disbelievers in Almighty Allah and His prophets state, quote, "Far, very far is that which you are promised. There is naught but our life in this world. We die, and we live, and we shall not be raised again. He, prophet, is naught but a man who has forged a lie against Allah, and we are not going to believe in him." End quote. These verses involve the Day of Judgment, which is also the Day of Resurrection. The wicked rulers of the world of Satan have frowned on the prophets who were also responsible for conveying prophecies related to the coming of Almighty Allah in the last days. This is affirmed in Surah 16, where it states, quote, "And before thee also the messengers we sent were but men, to whom we granted inspiration. We sent them with clear signs and books of dark prophecies." End quote. The phrase "books of dark prophecies" refers to the eschatological prophecies that described Almighty Allah's destructive wrath. As such, the February 2014 meeting between the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and Karriem Allah during the 2014 Saviours Day Convention in Detroit, Michigan, as well as the events ensuing from this meeting, were prophesied to occur, as already established in Part 4 of this series. The fulfillment of these eschatological prophecies enlivened the integrity of the divine prophets, thereby solidifying the truth of that which Almighty Allah revealed to them, which they saw and documented. This is what is meant by the phrase, "The Spirit of life from God entered into them," prophets, and they, prophets, stood upon their feet. This reality is also well established in the Quran canon. It states in Surah 40, quote, "We will, without doubt, help our messengers and those who believe, both in this world's life and on the day when the witnesses will stand forth, the day when no profit will it be to wrongdoers to present their excuses, but they will only have the curse and the home of misery." End quote. Here, the witnesses that will stand forth refers to the two witnesses described in Revelation 11:3 through 6. Continuing with the fulfillment of Revelation 11:11, there is no doubt that anyone facing certain destruction would be fearful, especially of someone that they knew they could not overcome nor escape. This is what the synagogue of Satan and the nations of the earth now confront in the execution of the wrath of Almighty Allah. Hence, the phrase, "and great fear fell upon them, nations, which saw them," prophets validated. Moving to Revelation 11 verse 12, it states, quote, "And they heard a great voice from heaven, saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them." End quote. This, no doubt, is a continuation of verse 11. The fulfillment of this verse bears on the completion or cut-off of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's Messianic mission of offering grace to the nations of the earth, which was also shared by the Honorable Louis Farrakhan in particular. How so? In the Gospel of John, chapter 4, it states, quote, "Jesus, Messiah, saith unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work." End quote. In addition, in John 17, Jesus, Messiah, was prophesied to state the following at the completion of his messianic tenure. Quote, "I have glorified thee on the earth. I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was." End quote. The end of the 70-year grace period mentioned in the Daniel 9 prophecy seals the prophecies of the divine prophets, thereby establishing the complete fulfillment of what they uttered and wrote regarding the coming of Almighty Allah to destroy the world of Satan and to establish his eternal kingdom of peace. This is the meaning of the phrase in Revelation 11, verse 12. "And they, prophets, heard a great voice from heaven, saying unto them, Prophets, come up hither. And they, prophets, ascended up to heaven in a cloud. The fulfillment of this verse is also the launching of the advent of the Christ. According to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Christ means the crusher of the wicked. The advent of the Christ is the execution of the function of the Christ through the two witnesses, Karriem Allah and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, in that order. Hence, verse 13 sets the expectation for the epic destruction that ensues after the 70-year grace period is completed, which is at this current point in time, 2026. It states in this verse, quote, "And the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven." End quote. This has two connotations. First, this hour referred to the time span following the February 21st, 2014 meeting between the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and Karriem Allah, along with others, during the Saviours Day 2014 convention in Detroit, Michigan. Here, an hour consists of 60 minutes, which in the context of the fulfillment of this part of verse 13 referred to 6 months and not 60 minutes. 6 months from February 2014 brings us to August 2014. It was on August 24, 2014, that a major earthquake, 6.0 in magnitude, struck South Napa, California. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad stated, quote, "Earthquakes can destroy towns and cities instantly," end quote. This statement, which is the second connotation of verse 13, sets the expectation that entire cities in the United States will be imploded by extremely powerful earthquakes during this time of Almighty Allah's final wrath upon the wicked nations of the earth. Hence, the meaning of 7,000 in verse 13 pertains to this reality, as 7 means many, fullness, and abundance. The expectation is that countless numbers of people will be destroyed by the wrath of Almighty Allah. This brings us to the last phrase in verse 13, "And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven." Remnant refers to the enslaved black people of the Western Hemisphere, that is, those who survive Almighty Allah's complete destruction of the world, of the Caucasian people. This remnant, from the enslaved black people of the Western Hemisphere, will glorify Almighty Allah, their God, by hurriedly relinquishing the meaningless names and iniquitous practices of their mortal enemies, the Caucasian people. These actions will be the result of their urgency to be pulled out of the severe chastisement engulfing them. This relates to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's statement as follows, quote, "We believe the black man should be freed in name as well as in fact. By this we mean that he should be freed from the names imposed upon him by his former slave masters, names which identified him as being the slave master's slave," end quote. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad also stated, quote, "First, you must be given the names of your forefathers, whose names are the most holy and righteous names of Allah. Again, I repeat that restoring to you your identity is one of the first and most important truths to be established by God Himself," end quote. The enslaved black people of the Western Hemisphere will ultimately realize that casting off their slave masters' names is a non-negotiable requirement of Almighty Allah. Let us consider the fulfillment of Revelation 11, verse 14, which is the last verse in this prophetic scene. It states, quote, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly," end quote. What is a woe? A woe is an affliction that causes great sorrow, grief, and misery. Biblical scholars believe that the 3 woes in the book of Revelation are the divine plagues born of the prophecy in Revelation 8, verse 13, where it states, quote, "And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, 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 to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound." End quote. According to biblical scholars, these three woes are the fifth, sixth, and seventh trumpets blown by the last three of the seven angels. Although this interpretation appears plausible, it is incorrect. The fulfillment of verse 14 positions the function of the Messiah as this woe to the wicked rulers of the earth's inhabitants. How so? In Surah 6:42, it states, quote, "And indeed, we sent messengers to nations before thee, then we seized them with distress and affliction, that they might humble themselves." End quote. This places all divine messengers as woes. However, given that Revelation 11 is an eschatological prophecy, then this woe refers distinctly to the Messiah, who is raised in the last days of the world of Satan. Therefore, unlike the divine messengers of the past, who were sent to specific peoples, towns, or nations, the Messiah was sent to warn an entire world of its impending doom by Almighty Allah. Hence, in Revelation 11 verse 14, the second woe, which is past, represents the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and his physical cut-off as the Messiah of grace, in accordance with the fulfillment of the Daniel 9 prophecy. This means that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the first woe, wherein the end of his tenure as the Messiah of the grace period came in February 1975. He passed this function to the Honorable Louis Farrakhan to finish the work of the grace period, as indicated in John 17 verse 4, "I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do." Karriem Allah, therefore, is the third woe, which also aligns with the fulfillment of the Daniel 9 prophecy, hence the fulfillment of the three woes in Revelation 8 verse 13. Again, the first and second woes are now past. Indeed, the third woe has come quickly, with Karriem Allah's April 2024 announcement of Almighty Allah's wrath, which also established the cutoff of the second woe, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan.